Paul Pogba, guys. So what's Paul Pogba's next club? For me, one of the finest midfield players on his day. The fact that he's been out of football for what, almost 2 years now. It's literally it's a shame, really. Because some of that talent, needs to be playing for me. And obviously, there's reports about Paul Pogba going to the MLS to play for DC United. And for me, Pogba still has a lot to offer, especially in Europe. I think, as I said, on his day, in terms of the qualities he has, I don't think there's too many better midfielders in the world. Obviously he's got to come back and prove his fitness, but in terms of his quality, as I said, one of the best players, one of the best midfielders I've seen play the game. If I'm honest, big up to Sham, big up to Reluctant Gamer as well. So yeah, in terms of his abilities, I mean, the guy's 6 foot. He can run. He can head the ball. He's strong. He's got decent pace. He's technical with both feet. He can pass. He can shoot. He can score goals. He's defensively, he's decent as well. So he's got a great touch. There isn't any weaknesses to Paul Pogba's game. And someone like that, and I think, what's he now? What, 32? I still think he has, as I say, he's got a lot to offer the game for me still. And the fact that he's been linked with DC United, I'm just hoping, I'm hoping that is just rumours because, as I said, and exactly what Shams just said as well, he is too good for the MLS. But yeah, I checked yesterday and I'm seeing noise about DC United, and again, as Shams just said, he's too good for DC United. I don't know why there isn't other teams that I have approached him. And again, you're getting Paul Pogba on a free. 32 years of age. Obviously Pogba is naturally a fit player anyway. So it won't take too long for him to adjust to the pace of the game and to get up to speed. Personally, I think because this season's obviously coming to an end, I think that's why he's not really made a decision yet. But I think there was talk about him making a decision in April, which obviously I think it was March or April, where he would have decided his next destination. And I think the fact that it's coming to the end of the season, I think it's quite clever what he's done, because I'm sure, there's going to be more clubs in for Pogba come the summer. Because as I said, you're getting a player that is, 32 years of age, experienced. Yeah, big up, gamer. Experienced World Cup winner. As I said, in terms of ability as a central midfielder, I forgot to mention he can dribble as well. Like, name me a central midfielder that can dribble like a winger. There isn't one really. So as I said, yeah, it's not gonna sit right with me that Pogba isn't in Europe. As I said, if he goes to MLS, that's a joke for me. And the thing as well, I don't think Pogba would ask for too much money, in my opinion as well. Big up to it's your boy Danny. Yeah, big up Danny. I don't believe that Pogba will ask for a lot of money. So I can't really see the money being a stumbling block. I think there's a lot of image rights, which might come into question. But as I said, yeah, in the Premiership, I mean, that Man United, I have him back in an instant. I'm surprised at Man City, obviously with the rivalry with Man United, it's quite hard for him to go to Man City, because obviously the backlash. But a Man City should be looking at him. Even a Chelsea, you say should be looking at him, because to get someone like that on a free transfer, these are the kind of things you can't pass up an opportunity. And I would go as far as saying Real Madrid, Barcelona. He can go and play for any one of them teams. And even if it's if it's a short-term deal, to see how he comes back, I'm just surprised that there isn't many teams in for him, with a player that quality. As I said, he's only 32 years of age, and it won't take long for him to get up to speed. As I say, he's a naturally fit guy anyway. His ability, he'll never lose that. It's just about him where he wants to go. And as Sham says, if I recall, he was linked to Como at one point. They're a new team in the Italian league. Yeah, Fabregas manages them. Yeah, Como. And again, Fabregas for me is going to be a top coach as well. You know, the guy's been under the likes of Wenger, Pep Guardiola, you know, Antonio Conte as well. So this is a guy that is destined to be a top coach in the future. But yeah, as I said, I can see the links with Pogba going to Como. You know, obviously you can tell Fabregas respects him highly. But for me, Pogba's too good for that, man. He should be playing for me either in England or in Spain. You know, as I said, I'd love him to come back to Man United. You know, and apply his trade back there again, man. You know, but is it going to happen? I don't know, but I just hope that I hope Man United look at the opportunity and think, you know, free transfer, you know, let's explore that, because as I said, I don't think Pogba will be commanding too much of a hefty wage. You know, I know the way obviously he left, there was a lot of fans that, you know, were glad to see him go. Fans like myself, you know, you don't hound out players like that. And again, the quality that's in Man United's squad right now, you know, these fans can't be passing up an opportunity to say no to a Paul Pogba. You know, it's madness for me. Guys, make sure you smash that like button. Okay, it's only one press of the button. And again, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure you do subscribe. What do you guys think of Paul Pogba? Where do you think Pogba's next destination is going to be? Do you think that Pogba should go to the MLS? Big up to Lapen 4. Or do you think Pogba still has a career in Europe? Because as I said, he's only 32 years of age, you know. And for me, he's got plenty of time left in the game, you know, because he's someone that doesn't rely on his physical attributes. He's someone that, you know, is a highly technical player. And imagine him playing in somewhere like a Spain for a Barcelona or even a Real Madrid and just conducting the midfield, because he can still do that for me. But yeah, what do you guys think? What do you think? Do you think Pogba's one of the best players of his generation as well? Because for me, if I liken Paul Pogba's attributes to anyone in world football, I think the only player that I can say that has literally everything that a central midfielder needs, I'm looking at Yaya Toure. I think in terms of what Yaya Toure had to his game, I think Paul Pogba is the closest thing to that, you know. And I would go as far as saying I think Pogba is more technically skilled than Yaya Toure, you know. So what do you guys think? Yeah, I agree, Sham. MLS should be a no-go. If we're saying in 2 to 3 years' time, I think it could, Saudi could be an option. You know, obviously MLS. You know, they've got the likes of Messi, Suarez, Sergio Busquets. You know, Jordi Alba, and I think there might be a few others. But I think Pogba at 32, there's no way he should be going there yet for me. You know, I think, as I said, Europe, at least give Europe another 2 to 3 years, I would say. Take him up to, what, 35, 36? Because I still think he can make an impact at any top team for me, you know. If it's a case where there's no takers in Europe and let's say the likes of I don't know, if we're saying in England, which again is not really going to happen, but let's say a club the caliber of, let me think, let's say Brighton, for argument's sake, you know, wanted to sign Pogba, then for me, I think he's better than that, really. You know, even though Brighton do play good football, but if it was only a Brighton that was an option, let's say for argument's sake, I would say that, yeah, maybe he should go to MLS. But because for me, he's still a player that can easily play for any side in the world. You know, he's that good for me, you know. And the fact that there's no interest is a bit surprising. But maybe there might be some noise in the summer for sure. So Sham says, Cruz retired, Modric will be retiring soon too. Real should snap him up as a squad player. Listen, 100%. I think you can see the impact that Toni Kroos going has left avoiding that midfield. Obviously, Modric is almost 40, or he might be 40 now. And as great as a player Modric has been, obviously his legs can't go on forever. And you can see that the likes of a Pogba, you know, and again, you're saying Pogba will be a squad player. Nah, listen, if Pogba is fit, if Pogba can prove his fitness, because again, the ability is always going to be there, then he's a starter. You know, I don't want to be hearing about Jude Bellingham's in the way. Like, Pogba's better than Bellingham. You know, if Pogba was to come back, prove his fitness, and Real Madrid needed someone to be a conductor, because they've lost the likes of Toni Kroos and Luka Modric, Pogba's in that team instantly. You know, I'd have Pogba, Camavinga as a midfield 2. Or if you want to play a midfield 3, Pogba, Chouameni, Camavinga. You know, if Arda Güler is not going to get game time, you know. So, yeah, for me, that's a no-brainer, man. You know. Big up to Sam's. Is it Sam? Yeah, big up, man. Big up. Guys, make sure you smash that like button on the way in, you know, and and again, make sure you subscribe to my channel. So yeah, no, but it's a good question, man. I wouldn't have Pogba as a squad player. No way. There's no way a player like that should be a squad player for anyone. You know, he's a definite starter for me. So yeah, let's keep that into being realistic. You know, if he goes to anywhere, he's gonna be a starter. Now, Sham, I hear what you're saying, man, but he's not a squad player to start off with. I think if we're looking at in the summer, you know, new season, and obviously he goes into pre-season, he ain't gonna be a squad player to start with. He's gonna force his way to being a starter. That's for sure. Yeah, big up to Steve-O. Steve-O says, depends if he's fit and serious about it. Listen, Pogba's a professional, man. Of course he'll be serious. You know, I hear what you're saying, but for me, there's no doubt in the quality of the player, man. And you know, the fact that he's been off for 2 years, you know, and wants to get back to playing, that will show you that how serious he is. You know, I have no doubts about his professionalism and how serious he is, because he could have easily just, you know, decided to not come back. You know, he's made enough money as it is. But again, his hunger for the game is still there. As I said, I just don't understand why there isn't more interest in other teams for him. You know, I think there was links to Man City, but whether they were serious or not, you know, Man United, there was links there. Obviously, him coming back to train. But I think it's more of a thing for the summer, you know. And as I said, I can see I can see more teams coming in the summer. I can't see it. Pogba goes to MLS and not one team in Europe comes in for him, you know, whether it's a big team or not, because yeah, it wouldn't make sense to me. But I do hear what you're saying. Guys, what do you think? Anyone else think that Pogba should stay in Europe, or do you think he should go to the MLS? What do we think? Everton 2-2 against Ipswich, conceding. So I think if Everton get a point, you know, that pushes. I think they might push United down to 15th before they play Brentford tomorrow. Got West Ham, Tottenham as well. Anyone seen the Arsenal lineup? Do you know what? I'm surprised at Arsenal's lineup, to be fair. You know, he's actually gone for a fairly strong team. I think it's Raya in goal. Ben White's playing. There's no Jurriën Timber. So you got Ben White, Kivior. I'm not sure if Saliba's playing. I think Lewis Skelly's playing. Declan Rice, Saka, Trossard, Martinelli. I think Mikel Merino's on the bench. But I'm actually surprised. I thought he would have changed his team a bit more than that. But again, he's probably thinking the same way that I'm thinking. You know, they can't afford to not win this game, because if they don't win this game, the pressure's on, because their next 2 games, as I said, are Liverpool and Newcastle. And before they play Liverpool, City have got Southampton, which you expect them to win, and they'll be on joint points if they don't win this game, or even if they get a draw, they'll be a point ahead. But they're going to be in trouble. This is a penultimate game, I think, for their league season. You know, I think if they get 3 points, you know, I think it's safe to say that they will finish second, regardless of the results against Newcastle and Liverpool, because they got Southampton last game of the season. But if they don't win this game, I think City picked them to second place. You know, so they've got a massive 2 games coming up. today and then on Wednesday, Arsenal. So Sham says if he goes to MLS, then it shouldn't be DC. He should go to Inter Miami. Yeah, I heard that, man. To go and play with Messi, Suarez, Jordi Alba, and Busquets, yeah, that would be mad. Imagine Pogba in the team with them. I do hear that, yeah. I mean, the DC United thing, I don't really get, you know, unless they're offering him something ridiculous. Because I think there was talk about something to do with the image rights. I can't remember what it was, but yeah, if he was to go to MLS, to go into Miami would be ideal. But again, I don't want to see Pogba go to MLS, man. Not for 1 minute. Yeah, not for 1 minute. Big up to Mr. Greninja. Yeah, big up. So Sham says Arsenal have a strong squad. Hardly any changes, as you said. They have to win. Yeah, well, I mean, you know what? This is going to be a big game for Arsenal because, as I said, if they don't win this game, they're in all sorts of problems. You know, because they've got the Champions League coming up, and you'd assume they'll go out that one, and then they've got big games in the league that they need to at least win. You know, because could you imagine if Arsenal get knocked out on Wednesday, and then City overtake them in second place? You know, personally, how does Arteta come back from that? Because if I'm honest with you, they will need to act. I know he signed a new contract, but they will need to act seriously because that would be unacceptable. And as I said, you say they got a strong squad, but I don't think they have, if I'm honest, you know, because if I'm looking at their first 11, the only players that I would say that I really rate from Arsenal's team, and when I say rate, I rate, you know, in terms of these are the players that, you know, could play for most teams in the world. I would only say, you know, possibly Urian Timber, Saliba. Obviously, Gabriel's out injured. I think the centre back pairing, you know, you would take at many clubs around the world. Timber, you know, Lewis Skelly's had a great season, but again, he's got to carry that on next season. And Bukayo Saka, really, I think he's the only one. You know, Bukayo Saka, would he get in at Barcelona? No. Would he get in at Real Madrid? No. Would he get in at Bayern Munich over Elise? I wouldn't have him over Elise. And obviously, he wouldn't play on left wing. Would I have him at Man City? I think Savinho, to be fair, has got potential. You know, I think Savinho will get better. You know, so again, yeah, I think Bukayo Saka, it's a maybe. You know, because if I look at Saliba and I look at Gabriel, would Saliba and Gabriel as a pairing get in at Real Madrid? You know, possibly. You know, obviously got Rudiger there. You know, who I think's a top defender, but they could possibly get in. You know, not a definite, because I say Rudiger for me is a top defender and would happily be in that team. Barcelona, again, the same thing. You know, I rate Ronald Arroyo highly, but he's a bit injury prone. Paul Pogba is young. You could possibly say they'll get in there as a pairing. Bayern Munich, they would, for me. Man City, yeah, I would say, because Ruben Diaz has dropped off. Obviously, Stones don't play enough. Ake's injury prone. I think Josko Gavada's a top player, but whether he plays left back better or centre back, we don't know. You know, no one in their midfield, I would say. Oh, PSG, sorry, would their pairing get ahead of PSG's pairing? I like that Pacho, to be fair. I think he's decent, you know, and Marquinhos. But you'd probably say as a pairing, you know, it's probably, yeah, touch and go, really. I'm not too sure. Would Saka get into PSG's front line? I don't know. Well, I mean, he wouldn't be in ahead of Dembele and Kvaratskhelia for me. So you're looking at Barcola and Doué. You know, he's got a shout for that. So yeah, I can. You know, there's a couple of players. I think if you look at their midfield in like the likes of Thomas Partey, to be fair, Thomas Partey would have a shout to get into. You know, there could be an argument for him to get into the Real Madrid lineup. in central midfield. I don't think Declan Rice would, personally. I know he scored 2 great free kicks, but could Declan Rice get into PSG's midfield? No. Barcelona's, I don't think he's better than Pedri or De Jong, so no for me. Man City, he's not better than Rodri. If I look at their midfield now, they haven't really got central midfielders, I would say. So Man City could possibly get in there. Real Madrid, I'm sorry, not Barcelona, Bayern Munich. Yeah, got Kimmich, possibly Bayern Munich, you know. So they've only got a couple of players that comfortably start, you know, and the same with Thomas Partey, you know. So yeah, I'll say that. Big up to War Sports. War Sports says Eubank Ben was a great event, iconic. It was, man. It's a great fight, you know. For me, one of the best fights I've seen for a while. You know, it wasn't a technical fight. It was more of a war, as your name states, War Sports. You know, it was a fight, really. You know, both fighters didn't want to lose. I think technically, as you know, Eubank Jr. is ahead by a long way over Conor Benn. But to be fair, Conor Benn showed a lot of heart in that fight, and so did Eubank Jr. And I think those last couple of rounds was absolutely ridiculous, man. You know, it was both fighters, you know, never say die. And yeah, big up to Miro. Miro, if you're coming through, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to my channel. Yeah, what I would say, them last 2 rounds, it was mad. And, you know, it just showed how much heart that Eubank Jr. has. You know, he was just out on his feet, you know. But to be fair, Conor Benn was hanging in there, you know, and, you know, he's tough, Conor Benn. Again, Conor Benn's from my area, so, you know, big up Conor Benn, man. But, yeah, Eubank Jr. was clearly the winner. To be fair, I was shocked at the actual scorecard, you know, because they showed the viewers' scorecard, which was a draw, you know. And again, it just shows you that, you know, it's either biased or a lot of people that don't really know what they're looking at. But the judges gave it unanimous, and obviously it's a massive distance. What, 116 to 112, you know. And I think when they called out 116 to 112. If you actually look at Conor Benn's face when it happened, Conor Benn knew that he lost the fight, but I think he was more surprised at how big a distance it was, you know, because I'll be honest with you, at the time, I didn't think it was that massive distance between the scorecards. I thought, you know, if Eubank was going to win, I thought he might have been, you know, at least 116, 115 or 114, you know, just going by the viewer's scorecard. I mean, you can clearly see that Eubank Jr. was the better fighter. You know, he was the one that was, you know, that was pressing the issue on Conor Benn. I think Conor Benn got a couple of good shots in, but Eubank Jr. for me dominated that fight. But I didn't think it was that much of a distance, if I'm honest, you know. And obviously there's a rematch clause there. But if I'm honest, do I see the rematch happening? I don't, you know, because again, Eubank Jr. took a lot to get him down to that weight. And in a sense, he's done what he's had to do. And again, if the money's right, then he might go down and fight him again. But I think just because of the drain of the weight, you know, it might be a bit of an issue that he might not want to take again. And again, Conor Benn needs to go back to welterweight and try and capture the major titles there, really. So, do I see them both fighting again? I'm not too sure. You know, I think if the money's right, then anything can happen. But I would say at the moment it's a no. You know, but what a great fight that was. But big up. Steve-O says, if Arsenal lose this game with basically their strongest 11, can't see them beating PSG. Yeah, big up, Steve-O. Steve-O, what I would say, for me, Arsenal don't beat PSG anyway. That's the first thing. And as I said earlier today, this is Arsenal's biggest game of the season. And the fact that he's playing the team that he's playing, I think he knows that as well. Because as I said, he could be in trouble. He could be in trouble over this next weekend. Because as I said, if they don't win today, or even if they get a point, by the time Man City play But sorry, by the time Arsenal play Liverpool next week, Man City are playing Southampton on Saturday. And if City beat Southampton, which you think they would, City will either be on joint points or 1 point behind if Arsenal don't beat Bournemouth. And then Arsenal's next game's Liverpool away. And then City have Bournemouth at home. And again, you'd expect Arsenal to get... if Arsenal would need to beat Liverpool for them to have any chance of staying in second. And then if that doesn't happen, City play Bournemouth at home. City will be ahead of them. So this game now, today, is going to be crucial for Arsenal. Because if Arsenal don't win this game, even if they get a draw, I think City gets second place. That's how big it is. Arsenal need nothing but a win in this game. Otherwise, I can see City getting second place. But yeah, big up. Gamer says, Usyk, Ben should have won. Usyk said Ben should have won. Really? What, is there any quotes for that one, Gamer? Because I've not seen that. I would like to know why he thinks that. But yeah, I'd like to know why he thinks that, because I think he's got that one wrong, you know. Big up to T-Man Taus, says, it's so shameful to watch Ilkay. Listen, I'm not sure if that's a diss to Gundogan or just how much we remember how good he was. For me, Ilkay Gundogan, again, he has dropped off, but when he was in his peak at Man City, he was their best player for me. You know, he was the best player in the league when he was in his peak. You know, the guy is a top footballer. You know, can play as a false nine, central midfield. You know, he can play as a deep line playmaker where Rodri plays. You know, he's a top player for me, Gundogan. I think him going to Barca, you know, was the wrong move because, you know, if he was going to go Barca, he should have gone to Barca in his prime. But what I would say, him coming back now to play with Man City, again, Gundogan always offers, you know, a certain quality. But I think in terms of his legs have gone a bit. But there's no doubting how good Gundogan was in his prime at City. You know, people talk about Kevin De Bruyne. For me, Ilkay Gundogan is a better player than De Bruyne. You know, he was more crucial for me than De Bruyne was. You know, again, that's probably controversial, or unpopular. But for me, Ilkay Gundogan in his prime was better than De Bruyne. You know, and it's not a debate for me. But big up. T-Man Tal says, why don't players like that retire? Yeah, I think Gundogan, for me, probably has one more season at City, I would say. You know, but I think he might need to be used sparingly, you know, not starting every week. I don't think that's him. But he's a top player, man. So top players like that don't come around so often. So, you know, for me, he can get back to the top for Man City easily. But obviously time's ticking, so we have to wait and see. Yeah, exactly. So it's on YouTube. He gets asked he gets asked the question. So he thinks that Usyk should have won that fight. He thinks Conor Ben should have won the fight. I'm not so sure. Yeah, big up Sham. So Sham says, Gav, you mentioned Conor Ben is from where you're from. So you're from Essex then? Yeah, I'm from there. Yeah, exactly, man. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Conor Ben literally is from... Well, he's originally from my area. In Ilford. He's originally from my area there. But I think where he's living now is literally, from my area. Oh, big up Sham. Sham, where was you born in Essex then? Whereabouts? Whereabouts was you born in Essex? Big up DXR. Big up, bro. Make sure you smash that like button on the way in as well. Just talking about... Sham, that's mad. Sham, that's actually mad. Sham, I'm actually from there. I actually used to live on the other side of the first place you just said. I lived on the other side, and I've actually moved to in between the second place and the other place. Yeah, so that's mad. So yeah, I'm actually from... Yeah, I'm actually living in Not far from the second place you just said. That's mad. But big up yourself anyway. Yeah, I'm all good, DXR, man. Yeah, listen, man, 100%, yeah. Yeah, it's gone. So Sham, I used to live in Howard Wood, man, for about 9 years. But obviously I've moved now. So yeah, big up, man. So yeah, Tommy Vision says, what team do you support? So big up, Tommy. So unfortunately, Manchester United, I have to say. Semenyo's on the bench. I'm surprised at that one. Cliver, Utara, Tavernier, Evan Nilsson. So Bournemouth, Arroyo's back in. So Bournemouth have got Anton Semenyo on the bench, which I'm surprised at. You know, it might be a little injury there. Yeah. So yeah. So Villa 1-0. Yeah, Everton 2-2. That's the 2-0. So yeah. Yeah, that's what I would say. I think. Yeah, just going back to what we were saying. Yeah, massive game for Arsenal today for me. You know, and they need to definitely get a result. But guys, just going back to original what we were talking about. So Paul Pogba, you know, what do you guys think? Do you think he should stay in Europe, or do you think he should move to the MLS? Obviously, DC United interested, and as I said, a player that talent, you know, obviously having to prove his fitness, a player like that for me definitely definitely should have some offers from teams in Europe, and I think the summer will. You know, we'll have to wait and see what happens there because, as I said, you know, this is a supreme talent for me, and you don't get players like this often, you know. And as DXR says, Europe, yeah, 100%, man, 100%. As I said, for me, I think personally, you know, if Barca wanted to bolster their midfield, you know, Barca should look at a deal for him. You know, I know because you've got to think you're getting him on a free as well. You know, and obviously the wages I don't think will be astronomical, but if they want to add quality to their midfield, you know, they could get a Paul Pogba in, no problem. And again, he adds physicality to their midfield as well. Yeah, listen, DXR, we're singing from the same hymn book, man. Pogba can go to any team, but the fact there's not a lot of takers, it might be something in it. I think they might be waiting till the summer. Real Madrid again, you know, they should be looking at him as well. So yeah, yeah, big up Tommy Vision. Yeah, listen, check out my other content as well. You know, there's loads of content on there. Check out my shorts and that as well. And as I said, if you got any questions, man, make sure you put them in, man. You know, obviously I've got some good people in this chat. DXR, Reluctant Gamer, Sham 100%. Big up yourselves, man. So DXR says, man, he's a great player. His reputation letting him down. You know what? You know what, DXR? I like this. These are the kind of things that I don't like because his reputation is letting him down, as you said. I don't agree with that because the problem is with this English media is that the English media cannot relate to players like Pogba. You know, people talk about Pogba's dancing and dabbing, as Shams already mentioned. You know, and at the end of the day, what about a lot of these other players that have a lot of misdemeanors? You know, I mentioned to you Ryan Giggs. Ryan Giggs was a model professional, but the dirtiest dog in the street, man. You know, look what he done to his brother. You know, and Ryan Giggs is still held in high regard by these Man United fans. Pogba, you know, he's a respectful guy. You know, yeah, he likes to dance, but what has that got to do with anything? You know what I mean? I think what the problem is that the English media and the English culture as a whole, you know, they just can't relate to players of personality, you know, because they like players like a Harry Kane, who's squeaky clean, you know, and is a media darling, you know. The players with real personality, they can't get to grips with. And for me, it's often if you're a black player, you know, you're going to get more criticism, you know. So all this, you know, his reputation letting him down, I don't agree with. You know, I think that's a load of nonsense, if I'm honest, because You don't see Pogba out in the streets getting drunk. You know, look at Wayne Rooney. You know, Wayne Rooney was doing his prostitution, was shagging his prostitutes. You know, the guy was just getting drunk all over the place, but you don't really hear of it. But yet people want to talk about Paul Pogba because he dances and dabs. You know, it's nonsense. Even Jesse Lingard was getting criticism because of that. Whatever these guys do in their own time is their own time, you know, as long as they're performing on the pitch, you know. But all this nonsense about his reputation letting him down, it hasn't. You know, he got acquitted of the ban. He done 2 years, you know. And again, do I think Pogba put an illegal substance into his system? I don't. You know, how are we ever going to prove it? We can't. But you know, I don't think he's letting his reputation down. I just think that people just have a perception of Pogba, and they're going to have it regardless. It's the same with Neymar. You know, they have a perception of Neymar, that Neymar's flash, and you know, Neymar is someone that goes down too easily. You know, but I think the English media just love to get onto someone like a Neymar because, again, Neymar has a lot of things in his favour, you know, and he's flamboyant, you know, he's marketable as well. They might assume that he's flash, you know, but he's expressing himself. And the thing is, as I said, the English media can't relate to that, you know, and as long as the English media have their agendas, players like this will continue to get criticism, you know, and that's the thing. That's all there is to it, you know. And the fact that, as I say, Pogba's a black man as well, he will get it even harder, you know. But yeah, end of the day, just look at the quality of the player and look at what he's won. You know, there's no argument for me that he's a top player, man. But yeah, big up yourself anyway for the comments. Yeah, big up the XR, man. Big up. Yeah, listen, the media would capitalize on him. You know, as I said, the media are a massive problem in this country. The media, a lot of these ex-pundits as well, they're a massive problem. These commentators, you know. As I said, when Man United played against, who was it? Who did they play the other day? The commentators was Robbie Savage and Rio Ferdinand. And, you know, I implore people to ignore these guys because these guys, if you're someone that's liked in the media, these guys are just going to be talking you up in the commentary for doing not much. You know what I mean? And, you know, these pundits are just, they're poisonous, a lot of them, you know. So I'd implore people to just have your own mind and don't go with the narrative that these guys are trying to push out, you know. Yeah, listen, DXR. Listen, Ryan Giggs, man, growing up, was one of my favourite players. You know, I've actually met Ryan Giggs in person. You know, if anyone remembers Ryan Giggs with the curly hair, you know, the young left winger. Again, Ryan Giggs was devastating back in his day. Did I ever think he'd be what he become, a dirty dog? No, I didn't. You know, because again, having met him face to face, you know, you think that these guys are model professionals, but again, to do what he done to his brother. Yeah, there's no respect there, man. And again, this doesn't get talked about a lot. Even Jamie Carragher, look at Jamie Carragher, another one. You know, the guy gets chance after chance, you know, spitting at children, you know, losing his head. You know, although I do think in terms of his presentation for Monday Night Football, I do think it's decent. You know, I do think out of a lot of the English pundits, he's probably one of the best ones because he does talk, you know, truthfully. But you tell me a black man that does that and gets their job back after doing what he done, that's not going to happen, you know. So this whole thing about Pogba's attitude and a lot of these other players' attitude and reputation, you know, I think we need to look closer to home and see what a lot of these other people have done and got away with, you know. Nah, listen, I like Cole Palmer. Cole Palmer is, it's not like Cole Palmer's proper bland. Cole Palmer is just nonchalant. He doesn't care, you know. Like, Cole Palmer's one of them guys that he'll just do what he wants when he wants, you know. And those kind of players I've got time for because they're not trying to fit in to this whole mold that the English media, you know, a lot of these pundits want want the players to be. You know, Cole Palmer is his own player, and you can see that with the way he plays. You know, when he celebrates, he just does his own thing. And I like players like that because these guys just don't give a damn. You know, and they need more players like this. So Tommy says, who would you say is bigger rivals for United, Liverpool or City? Oh, easily Liverpool. Yeah, Liverpool's the biggest rivals for United. Purely because of when both teams were dominating back in the day, obviously before I was born. Obviously, the rivalry comes from there. And obviously, I think a lot of the rivalry comes from something to do with the Docks as well, you know. So, yeah, Liverpool's a bigger rivalry than City is for United, you know. But City's a rivalry in its own sense, you know. The fact that City are the new kids on the block, really. And they've taken United's crown, really. You know, that's where the rivalry comes from. But if you're talking about history, then it's definitely Liverpool, yeah. DXR says, okay, fair, I get you, but Mourinho made him sound like a big problem. Yeah, again, Mourinho did. And, you know, a lot of these fans would buy into narrative, you know. As much as a good manager that Mourinho was, Mourinho had his faults, you know what I mean? And, again, there was a clip of, you know, when he, I think it was in training, and there's something he said to Paul Pogba, you know, and then everyone's just started getting carried away with that, saying that, you know, Pogba's creating an issue for the team, for the squad. Again, these things could have been done behind closed doors, but Man United failed Pogba because they brought him in as the big signing, but didn't provide the platform for him to succeed. You know, just like many other great players that they've brought in. And then you look at Man United's team now, and then when we have to watch the likes of Bruno Fernandes, Garnacho, and Rasmus Højlund as a front three, people wonder why. You know, it's because the good players have been hounded out of this club, you know, and the list goes on. So, yeah, Gamer says, I hate racism. Listen, racism is rife in football, and it's always going to be there, you know, because, you know, it's just, it is what it is, man, unfortunately. And a lot can be done to combat it. You know, when you got these players doing, you know, the kneeling for the George Floyd thing, I don't agree with that, you know, because a stronger action should be done, you know. Imagine if a lot of the black players got together and they just decided to walk off the pitch. That would be more powerful than just, you know, taking a knee for me. You know, if they all decide to get together, you know, because they're getting racially abused constantly and decide to walk off the pitch, that is more powerful than taking a knee for me. So, but yeah, racism's a joke in football. You know, all you have to look at is what happened to England, you know, when they got beat in the Euros by Italy. Just look at the players that were getting the criticism, you know. So that's all you have to look at, man. There's always a certain scapegoats, you know, and it's always going to be there. Sham says, Tommy, always will be Liverpool, City are only noisy neighbours to United. Yeah, I agree. Saliba is playing, yeah. So they're playing exactly... I think they're playing more or less the same team that they're going to play against PSG. So, yeah, as I said, guys, Arteta is taking this game seriously because he knows he needs to win the game. So Tommy says, I actually support Liverpool, but to be fair, I don't hate United as much as a lot of fans do, though. Yeah, it's because of history, you know, because if you look at Liverpool just equaling United's 20 titles, you know, that's because the rivalry was there from day. Obviously, it goes back to, I think, as I said, I'm not too sure, but it's something to do with the Docks. But the fact that United and Liverpool both have 20 titles, again, the rivalry is there. You know what I mean? The Northwest rivalry. So, yeah. Big up to Krug Lush Kush, says he plays in Liga 1 French League already, signed for a club. Who's that you're talking about, Krug Lush? Not too sure. So Sham says, I hate Man United. Gaz supports United, but he's cool. Listen, the rivalry will always be there, man. And I have to say, I'm actually ashamed to be supporting United right now. But because over the last 10 years, this club's been a shambles, how it's been run. This season's been arguably the worst I've ever seen. And as I said, as you guys know, if you've been watching my channel for a little while now, this Europa League is key. They have to win it. And, You know, that's all I'm going to say on Amarim, really, because if he doesn't win it, he has to go for me. You know, and I'll keep it consistent. So DXR says these commentators' media have a massive impact on the game, massively, massively. You know, as I said, you know, these commentators know what they're doing. You know, if you look at the players that are liked in the media, they never get any bad press. You know, that's not by accident. That's on purpose. You know, you look at the likes of Kevin De Bruyne. You know, Kevin De Bruyne is a good player, but the way that this media talk about him, you'd think that he's the best player to ever play the game. You know, he can do no wrong. You know, I've watched Kevin De Bruyne be, you know, poor in so many games for Man City, never talked about. Because the commentators and the media that are covering the game, they're just trying to hide the fact that, you know, that he has lost his legs and he is on a decline. But you're only going to hear when he does well or when he scores, you know. So, as I said, I'm a true fan of football. I've been watching football from day, you know. I've played football, you know. I was at Chelsea and Tottenham in the academy as well. You know, I've had a lot of experience in playing and watching and coaching, and even taking a deep interest into, you know, what actually goes on behind the scenes in terms of the media and pundits, etc. So when I say these kind of things, it's because, you know, I take a very deep interest in what's actually going on. There's no coincidence why certain players are always criticised and certain players are always praised, you know. And then when you get these pundits coming on as commentators, just have a look at the players that they always seem to praise and the players that they always try to show that needs to be doing better. It's done on purpose, guys, you know. And a lot more people need to open their eyes as to what's really going on. But big up anyway. Yeah, as you said, and how we form our opinions. Yeah, but again, that's for people that are not really invested in football like that, you know. With me, I'll always give you the truth, you know, regardless of anything. I'll always give you the truth, you know, because I have no reason to, you know, to lie or to say certain things. But I understand what's going on. And even before I had a platform, you know, I was fully aware of what was going on, you know, and that's why my channel for me is a no holds barred, you know, actual truth about anything football, you know. There's certain players that will get protected. There's certain players that will get criticised, you know, and the players that often get criticised, you know, look like this. And that's the truth, you know. Tommy Vision says, I was just thinking about the racism from the loss to Italy is so bad. Listen, you had I remember reading reports where when Italy beat England on penalties, there was certain black fans that were at pubs or at the game, you know, and certain black fans were getting thrown into the River Thames. That's what I heard. You know, obviously black fans were getting attacked as well in pubs. Yeah, these were the reports that were coming out. And am I surprised? I'm not, because this is what happens. You know, this are the kind of things that happens. You know, there's certain scapegoats for certain people, you know. Even when, you know, England made it to the final, it was Raheem Sterling that got them to the final. But all you see on the front pages was Harry Kane. You know, we know why that is. And again, Harry Kane's a top player, but anyone watching them Euros will know that Raheem Sterling, and I'm not even a big fan of Raheem Sterling, but Raheem Sterling was the reason for England getting as far as they did. But all the talk was about Harry Kane. And again, these things are not done by accident. So DXR says, Saka went to Greenford High, same high school as my cousin's sister who was a year above him by 2 years. Yeah, listen, Saka for me, I think he's a good player. I do think he's massively overrated though, you know, and maybe because the media feel guilty as to what happened to him in the Euros, they're trying to just overdo it now. But for me, I do think he's a very good player. But in terms of this world-class talk, he's nowhere near world-class. He's not. He's just a very good player in a very good system, and that gets the best out of him, you know. But the way that this country talk about Saka as if like he's better than Yamal, you know, look at Yamal's level and then you'll see Saka. And again, that isn't taken away from Saka, because Saka is a very good player, but he's not that level that they think he's, you know. But yeah, the treatment was disgusting. Saka, Jadon Sancho, Marcus Rashford. I remember. DXR says, how would Pogba do at PSG? Well, the answer to that is he'll do very well. The only issue is now, what I would say, because Pogba can go into that PSG team easily. The only problem I would say is that the balance of this PSG midfield, you know, if you're Luis Enrique, would you want to disrupt that? You know, I mean, if I'm Luis Enrique and I've got a Paul Pogba available, like I'm bringing him in, no question, you know, and I'm playing a Vitinha, Pogba, and Fabian Ruiz midfield. But the balance of what they've got now is working. So I wouldn't see PSG being interested in Pogba because of that reason. But as I said, and for me, Pogba doesn't come in to be a bench player for João Neves. He doesn't. But I think the balance of what they've got, you probably wouldn't want to disrupt that, you know. But as I said, man, he's a top player, man. And someone that in the summer should be highly sought after. And I'm just hoping, guys, you know, it's Man United. You know, we can all dream. But on a free, you know, this is a player that should be definitely be bought. So yeah, but guys, big up everyone for coming on. Appreciate it each and every time. Big up to Tommy Vision as well. Obviously, new subscriber. Big up yourself for coming in and for your questions. Big up to DXR as well for coming on as well. And big up every time to Reluctant Gamer and to Sham 100%. As I said, guys, really appreciate the support, and I really appreciate the questions, you know, and the consistency in coming through, man. And again, guys, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure you do. I'm only a few short of 1K subscribers. And if you haven't subscribed to, and if you haven't smashed that like button as well, make sure you do. Again, it helps the channel to grow, and on the road to 1K and on to bigger and better things. So so yeah, guys, tomorrow I'm gonna be back, possibly for the match reaction to the Man United and Bournemouth game, where for me it's a I'll be honest, it's a must. Brentford, sorry, it's a must not lose game for me. You know, I think if they get a draw away to Brentford with the Europa League coming up, semi-final second leg, you know, for me that wouldn't be the end of the world. But if they get beat, you know, pressure's on for me, and again, the second leg might give them a bit of breathing space, but the league position ain't going to be good enough for me. So I think United need to avoid defeat. That's 100% for me. But guys, I will be back tomorrow, definitely, as I said, after the Man United Bournemouth game, which kickoffs at 2 o'clock. And I'm going to do an upload, guys, which I'm going to schedule to come out on Monday. So make sure you look out for it as well, because I want to talk about a certain player at Aston Villa, in Morgan Rogers. I want to discuss Morgan Rogers because I think, you know, there's a player there that isn't getting the credit he deserves, you know. And as I said, I'm going to do an upload today on Morgan Rogers, which is going to schedule to come out on Monday. So yeah, make sure you keep an eye on that one. And again, give me your comments and let me know what you think, you know. But yeah, as I said, I'm gonna be doing that today. Not sure what time, but I will schedule it to come out on Monday. And as I said, I'll be back tomorrow after the Man United and Bournemouth game, which kicks off at 2 o'clock. So yeah, make sure you got your notifications on, and again, make sure you come into the live chat. And again, give me your questions, guys. All questions are welcome as long as it's respectful. And yeah, keep the support going. And big up yourselves each and every time. And yeah, I'll catch you guys tomorrow. Take it easy.